All right, we are live for another edition of the Heads Up Challenge, Heads Up Feud of Doug Polk versus Daniel Negreanu. I am joined by the legendary K-Rab, Bear Wire, Kevin Rabichow. Man, I am excited to have you on here. I kind of know what I'm doing in the live streets, 300 big blinds deep, 8 players, 9 players. But I don't know what's going on 100 big blinds heads up. That's why I had to bring you in.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I mean, I've been waiting for a chance to chat with you about these hands. I know we haven't really gotten to talk sort of in my preferred game in our past chats. So this is a fun opportunity to do that.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I talk to you, I'm like, yeah. So 2 people limped and then some guy raised, and now it's like you're like, okay, well, I don't know, a 3-bet.
Yeah, this is. I mean, I've been following along, and this has turned out to be like an extremely competitive, high level match. Like the type of stuff that is getting commentated on in these matches is well above the. We're way past the 200 live hands on Poker Go at this point.
Are you surprised with the common question is, are we surprised with the way Daniel is keeping up?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think, my first reaction when I saw him playing the online matches was that he had clearly done some like training, whatever his training is, he had done some like online training pre-flop and on flops. That seemed like really, really obvious to me, just because like his strategy was so measured in those spots. And now I'm seeing a lot of like turn bet sizing variation, a lot of like river check raise bluffing, just like kind of adding layers, like overbetting, all this stuff that we didn't see early on. I don't know exactly what Daniel's methods have been for kind of adding those things to his game, but it's definitely like a more advanced strategy than I was expecting to see like this early on.
All right, so here we see an open from Doug, a defend from Daniel, check flop. Now the turn, double flush draws the board. Do you expect Daniel to be like probing this turn at a high frequency?
Yeah, I think it's a good spot. Really like all sorts of bet sizes, as long as he's just betting really frequently. Kind of like you would guess, like just all low cards is going to be a good thing for the big blind. That's kind of the simplest way to look at it.
Now backdoor flush draw does fill. King also fills. So we have to assume this is a better card for Doug.
I think it's a good card for both players. I don't think it's like an amazing spot for Doug. There's going to be like a few hands in his range that get to put in big raises here. There's going to be a few like really easy calls, like a king 8 kind of hand. But there's just lots of there's always, we were talking before the call actually, like how the ranges are so wide, like there's always just kind of the trash in both players' range, right? Like Doug's just going to have ace high a bunch. He's going to have maybe even like queen high that turn to draw, jack high that turn to draw. So like the king might be good for like a little bit of his range, but it's not a huge
enough
difference maker.
Exactly. So we missed the action on this board, but it looked like the turn went check.
Yeah, I think this is a 3-bet pot. Daniel 3-bet, small c-bet. Wow.
Are you surprised?
I like that play. I like his check down with the flush. It was a small c-bet on ace king 5
3.
Yeah, so the ace king 5, I mean, that's a great board for anyone who 3-bets, right? So you just expecting him to c-bet with pretty much anything is fine. But then he turns a flush, pretty good card for Doug. He starts checking and he checks all the way to the river with a great candidate to check raise all in. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good play.
Is there a little bit to be said where like his 9 paired, so he's more likely to check? Is that a thing there?
I think that's probably what the solver would, if you're deciding between, for example, like leading pot on the river and checking the river to trap, you might see that like removal of the 9 as, sort of an argument for like Doug doesn't improve very often on this card, so we should put more check raises in against him, like
Right.
just kind of like pressuring the medium strength parts of his range. So yeah, I don't think that's like a, he doesn't necessarily have to mix like that, but it is a good thing to just make it more likely Doug's weak. So put more pressure on his range with that hand.
On table 1, we see a raise, and now just like the small 20% size on the monotone board. I think that's relatively common. Turn comes a 9. Daniel has been mostly just choosing like 75% or check option, and he does go with the 75%, takes it down. Here on table 2, he goes with a big bet size. So this is like kind of more rare for Daniel. He mostly goes with the 20%. Sometimes he does choose the big size on these specific boards. Turn now, I think it's like pretty not great for his overall range. Obviously, hands like overpairs have lost a little bit of value. What do you think here?
Yeah, I'm like a little, not surprised, but a quick 3/4 spot bet again on the turn here. Definitely after Daniel bets large on the flop, Doug's continuing range is gonna have a lot of connectivity with the Jack of Spades. So again, it's not that he should never bet. It's not that Daniel needs to slow down with everything. It's just like, if we're looking at his overall strategy, he's going to want to play the spot more cautious. And that's an interesting one. 9 high flush puts in the small river value bet. I think that's probably just well played by both players.
What are your thoughts on, some people say in position you really shouldn't be betting less than half pot on the river?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, this one, I'm remembering a hand that Daniel played in, maybe it was in the live session, where he just bet like 1,000 on the river into, I can't remember the exact spot, but yeah, he's made a few very small river bets. I think it's...
I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
It's not something you're going to see in a solver that often, but that has to be qualified with like, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, right? That doesn't mean it's like a useless play to make. It's potentially better than checking, and if your opponent plays a certain way against it, it's potentially way better than checking. So it's maybe not something I'm using against the best of the best all that frequently, but it's a fine play, and it's something that you should at least consider.
Got it. Okay, so let's go with the left table, as this just hands are over. So who are some of the guys that you've been battling recently? Like, I feel like you're always battling the top guys.
Well, to be honest, I've spent a lot of the last year working on my tournament game. So as far as like heads up battles go, pretty much the only thing I focused on was the Legend Showdown that we played over on Run It Once. Like, yeah. I guess that was between 4 and 5 months ago now or so. I'm pretty like, I've been watching this match, so I wouldn't say that I'm like rusty at heads up, but I haven't really put in hands since the Legend Showdown finished.
Didn't matter. I had money on you on the Legend Showdown. I had money on you versus Doug. I was ready to go. I was like, let's dance.
I did play Doug a little bit too. That was fun. I liked. We got to chat a little bit about like how he was preparing, and I thought it was cool that he kind of like played his way up the ranks a little bit to prepare for this match.
Yeah, at first he was like just taking on like whoever. Oh, big overbet on the left table.
Yeah, really.
After turn goes check.
I'm guessing this was a small flopsy bet from Daniel. Yeah. So Doug just putting, basically just taking the responsibility to make that pot as big as he can when he has something really good.
3-bet pot now on table number 1.
It's definitely something that Doug does really well, is just like, maneuvering the big bets. So not just like pot or like 1.3x pot or something. Like really using everything in the range of like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the pot, whatever it is, whatever he thinks is appropriate.
And takes it down on the Ace King 10 after the small 20% sizing there.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I haven't watched Daniel's, kind of the intricate parts of his strategy over the last week or so. I think I was telling you, like, 3 weeks ago, I watched in pretty close detail.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to seeing what's changed, what's being updated.
So here let's go with table number one. They have this theory, the chat has a theory that table number one gets way more attention than table number two. Because of just like how we read, we just go from here that way.
Yeah.
There's also
you just like naturally rest your eyes to the left.
Yeah, I mean, the key is that I also put the most important person of the stream on the left. So you'll notice that you're on the left, and I'm on the right. So that's how we work things here,
Have you ever been on the left?
No.
You're a humble host.
Yeah, it's a running joke. It's like, okay, I whatever it is. Okay, so it's like
just
two relatively small pots. Daniel does choose the 75%. So Daniel has mostly two sizings, right? And he wins this one after the check down. It looks like he's going to win the second one also on the other table. Okay, so Daniel has mostly two sizings, right? How detrimental is that to a strategy, if it is at all?
Just to have like so few options that you're choosing between, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be honest, like I played heads up at a time when the options that we used were pretty limited. Like, I mean, even when Doug was considered one of the best, I think like the number of sizes that were getting used was fairly small. We probably did a whole lot of 75% on flops and turns. Maybe the good players were going all in on the river, but if they weren't going all in, they were probably just betting 75%. It's really limiting in the sense that, like, if you know how to leverage every size in the book, then you can gain a pretty big edge. Kind of surprised to see Daniel check down that king there.
Yeah, I saw that too.
But yeah, like, to not have, for example, like 40% pot in position probably not going to hurt him that much. There's just certain sizes that I think you really, really need. Like if he was never using 20% from out of position, I would say that's a big problem. Or if he was never going all in on the river and he was always picking like, 3/4 pot or whatever, that would be a big problem. But those like in between sizes, you can kind of do without them. You can get pretty close.
So check raise here from Daniel on 9-7-2 after the C bet from Doug. Gets called, turns a 5. So what kind of hands do you think Daniel should be check raising here? I assume he's going to be check raising some of his better nines, a myriad of draws, and now he chooses to check. So
I think he can even, he can even go weaker than that. There's a lot of benefit to protecting on an all low card board, and the big blind's going to have all the best hands, basically, like, except for pocket nines and pocket sevens, but they're going to have like plenty of two pairs and bottom set. So it's pretty easy for Daniel to check raise even as weak as like ace 7, ace deuce, queen 6 suited or something, like as a bluff.
10-8.
10-8 so, makes a lot of sense. Interesting that he checked the turn.
Do you think he's like maybe mixing in a way where like if he had a spade he would have bet the turn, or maybe he's just like rolled a low number, or like who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before about that hand where he check raised just like total air and followed through that one with the Jack 4 of clubs, right? So it is possible that when he, either first of all just like doesn't have a draw at all and feels like he needs to bluff sometimes, like maybe he just goes for it with like the nothing hands. An open ender, it doesn't have to bet. It could do something else. It could check and check call. It could check and check raise. A second time. So he might just be looking at it that way. I'm not sure if we've seen much of him just taking equity and like really going for like a 3 street semi bluff, so to speak.
turn gets called on table number 1 to pot now 4250. Doug chose a relatively big size on the turn, and he takes it down. Daniel does with the deuce of diamonds. Nice.
Yeah. So pretty likely that Doug just, had some kind of gut shot on the turn that decided it was going to try and take Daniel off of, one pair hands, and when he paired up on the river, just didn't want to be too greedy, didn't want to bluff too much.
3-bet from Daniel on table 1. See, it's not only us that are like picking table 1, is that there's just more action on table 1. Like, it's not, what do you guys want us to do? Table
I'm gonna
2
have to
now.
watch table 2, just like I'm gonna stare directly at the right of the screen. If anything happens on table 1, I'm sure someone will tell me.
Yeah, we'll get yelled at by the chat. There's a big hand. Zoom in on that table. So Daniel has now 3-bet a bunch of hands in a row, both tables. Like the last 6 hands, he 3-bet like 3 hands. So maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that'll I don't actually know what the pre-flop strategy. I remember Doug kind of being a bit loud on Twitter when he was in the midst of a downswing there, saying that Daniel's pre-flop strategy was really all over the place. I haven't seen the specific things that would lead to him saying that, but I do know that, heads up just involves a lot of 3-betting, and
I will share some of the things after this hand. But we have to talk about table 2 because we got 3-bet. There's a 3-bet now.
Very small bet.
Yeah, Doug chooses the very small sizing. This should get peeled at a very high frequency, and turn kind of polarizes the board, right? It's like,
yeah, this is a turn card that I think, at least in my experience, a player like Doug plays more aggressively than most. And I think that's just because, he probably just wants to be able to bluff in general. Like, not everyone designs their strategy. A lot of people will look at this spot and they'll just think like, oh, well, if I have an ace, like, I have it locked down. I have a bunch of hands that I want to check, so I'll just check, like, everything.
right.
And I don't view Doug as someone who thinks about it that way. I think he's going to take, like, a handful of bluffs, and there he is. He has an ace that was trapping. That's interesting.
Little trapper there. Okay. So Daniel has mixed up his pre-flop play a lot. So what caused that tweet from Doug was Daniel flatting queens multiple times pre-flop.
Oh, it showed down queens like
Through
more
the
than
flat.
once.
Yeah, through the flat line. So
Okay.
overbet from Doug on table number 1.
Yeah, I'm
3-bet
guessing
pot
this
on table number
was-
2.
This must have been a large size c-bet, or was it a large size turn probe from Doug? One of the two.
It's called Queen 8. Let's move over to table number 2 now, as this is a 3-bet pot. Now, Daniel chooses the big sizing on the flop after the 3-bet.
Yeah, I like this. Good board to go for big sizing. There's a lot of hands that just kind of want to get it over with.
What do you mean by that?
Like, it's such a dynamic board that, when you have like a king queen or like a pocket kings type of hand for value, you're not necessarily trying to like string Doug along with something like ace 3 suited or whatever. Like, you're kind of just trying to get it all in right now against a weak queen, or protect against jack 10 or king jack or whatever. There's just like a lot of it's a pretty marginal like equity spot where I think a lot of Daniel's value hands just kind of want to put max pressure.
What about this sizing?
It's 100 big blinds. Yeah, this is a weird turn sizing. Very curious to see what he shows up with here. I don't think Doug is going to go all in there with like a super strong hand. I don't think he's going to blow Daniel off with like, if he has like a set or a straight, I think he would just call.
Yeah.
But Doug might have gone all in for value there with a hand as weak as like queen jack, queen 10.
So what do you think when you see that turn sizing? Like, if you were playing against Daniel there, like what does that turn sizing indicate to you most likely? Like, it's kind of a weird size, I think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying. Sorry, I don't want to say it's weird. It's just different than the norm,
Yeah, it stands out. Like it makes me think that he had a certain type of hand that made him think like, oh, this is a good idea, right? So, maybe he bets large on the flop with jack 8 suited, and then turns a pair of eights, and he's like, okay, well, this hand, like, it's kind of too strong to bluff, but I don't really want to check. So that hand just makes a lot of sense to bet small. It could also just be a really, really strong hand, right? It could be Jack 10 suited, which was betting flop large to just get it in, and then he turns the nuts, and he's like, okay, well, same problem. Like, I don't really want to check. So that's the way I see it. Like, some really marginal hands trying to buy their way to a cheap showdown, and then some like really, really good hands that are trying to induce.
Okay, so here in table 2, it went 3-bet from Doug, big bet on the flop, turns of 10. That's definitely favoring Daniel. He's gonna have more 10x's than Doug in this formation.
He is, although at the same time, like, if I have like queen 10 of hearts on the flop and I get 3/4 pot into, like, I'm not really happy about that situation. I don't know how Daniel plays it. Like, he very well might just click call every time, but I'm considering fold right away.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely a good point. Like, queen 10 of hearts is just very low equity in that scenario.
Yeah. Interesting that he just goes all in 2 when check 2. I don't know how to read that, but from the speed of Doug folding, I think it's pretty clear Doug just had a bluff that doesn't really have a choice here.
I feel like so. There has been like sessions where it's gone like relatively slow, but that's not today. I feel as if today is a little bit spicy. Like,
yeah,
I see some spice in these two players today. Obviously, it could just be the hands, but I think they know you're watching, man. I think that's what it is.
yeah, they're trying to impress us.
Yeah. All right, so now that we have a little bit of a time, a little bit of time to breathe, the people need to follow you on Instagram, man. Are you gonna be on like a chef show? Are you like the next? are you like gonna be on Iron Chef or like Beat Bobby Flay, like one of those shows? Like, bro, I had an ex-girlfriend. We used to watch Beat Bobby Flay all day.
Those shows are great. Those are like whenever if I'm like up at the cottage or if it's like a holiday and I'm just like trying to chill for a few days. Those are like the TV shows or like staying in a hotel. Like, those are the TV shows you can always, I could watch like 20 episodes in a row.
They're good.
They're so good.
Yeah, Beat Bobby Flay's a good show. I went to Bobby Flay's restaurant in New York and listen, he was there, right?
Nice.
He was there. I know, I was shocked. I was like, whoa, yeah. He's there. Like, and they have it set up where when he's in the kitchen, like, you definitely can see him. Like, you walk by the kitchen, it's open, right?
Yeah.
Bro, my food was so salty that and I'm with this girl, right? And I'm literally like saying like, I'm gonna tell Bobby Flay that my food is salty. And she was like, no, you can't do that, because she's like a chef or whatever. She's like, no, that would be so embarrassing. I'm like, listen, Bobby.
It's embarrassing for him.
Yeah, like, Bobby Flay's here, and this is my only time in my entire life that I can tell Bobby Flay his food is salty, and he can taste it if he wants.
Yeah,
like,
you should have. Did you?
No.
Yeah, you should have. Oh, it would have been great.
Like, the girl's like, no, that's so embarrassing. Like, the food was salty as shit. I left it. It was like some like fucking pasta. I was like, oh man. I'm gonna ask what the dish was. Hold on a second. I gotta text this girl.
I think those like the thing with someone like Bobby Flay, those like celebrity chefs that really ham it up for the camera, like he's got to be used to getting a lot of flack from fans or guests or whatever, right? Like, you just, when you put yourself out there like that, I mean, it's kind of like, look at Twitter when Doug and Daniel are trying to do their jobs and and they're putting on a show for everyone. Like, you get like kind of the criticism, the armchair critics.
Oh
pretty
man,
much like nonstop, right? They're used to it. They can take it.
Listen, man, wait till you start playing some more TV games. If you get one hand wrong, like, it's like Kevin should not be coaching at Run It Once. Kevin's just lucky. All these things. I'm like, oh my god.
Yep.
It's too much, bro. Like, it's like,
that's a lot of stress as a cook, because I know, like, if I oversalt my own dinner, I'm like devastated. Like, it takes me like a day to get over it.
That's your own dinner, let alone some guest that's paying you $100 a dish, you know?
Yeah.
That's the thing, man. It's crazy out there. But no, you guys should follow. If you want some good dishes, or at least looking at some. I get hungry watching you, like looking at your stuff. Like it's too much. Like today you made some like apple pie oatmeal, or like sorry, not apple pie, like apple oatmeal, and I was like, oh my god, like all right, bro. All right. Anyway, check receiver on the right table.
I appreciate the plug. I do like talking with poker players about something other than poker every now and then. It's refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, I try, but sometimes the chat doesn't like it.
Yeah, fair enough. This is an interesting one. So Daniel's check raise on the turn was like pretty small, but I think that's a pretty good sizing to take when Doug like both players can have a full house here pretty easily, right? Like it goes check on the flop, so maybe Doug doesn't have so many Jack X, but then he bet big, like he bet reasonably big on the turn when check too. So he's at least like portraying the image that he could have a Jack.
Correct.
So if I'm Daniel, I'm not raising huge on the turn either, and this is very, I mean this is interesting. I don't think
about Daniel's sizing on the river.
So, I mean, there's definitely a chance that he just has something like if it was like a value bet, a legitimate like thin value bet, something like 8x of clubs, that was like kind of a thin turn check raise and now rivered full house, but like, you know, not the nuts.
Yeah.
But it also just kind of makes me think he was maybe bluffing and tried to get away with a cheap one on the river. Because both players can just have missed draws or like counterfeit 5x or whatever, like we can, that just became, you know, 7 high on the river or 6 high. So I think that's more what was going on there. And I think Doug probably just had a Jack.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess like given the sizing, do you think given the sizing Doug could raise an 8 or no?
I don't think he would. It's just like too many things need to go the right way, you know. Like if you're just a little bit wrong, because the turn is like such strong evidence that Daniel's representing a Jack. Mm-hmm. So you know the river being a small bet, like you don't just throw all that out the window and say like, okay, I've got to read like this guy's got an 8 for sure or worse.
Yeah. Okay, 2 3-bet pots here. So on the right table, Doug chose the small sizing on the flop. On the left table, he goes with the big sizing on the flop. Talk to me.
Yeah, interesting. So on the left, I mean, I guess it's over already, but he was, you know, pretty clearly representing over pairs for value. I think he could have been bluffing with like a weak hand, but Daniel just kind of quickly folds. No decision there. The small bet on King Jack Deuce is a little interesting because I don't think he always does that. I think I've seen Doug go for like the really big C bet sometimes. Mm-hmm. I could see, you know, some pretty strong value hands being likely to choose small bet on the flop, so like pocket jacks, pocket aces, those kind of hands might go with this line, even king jack. Less likely that he has a hand like ace king or king queen, because those hands are going to want to bet big on the flop.
And then he goes with the big sizing on the turn, gets called, and lands on this river.
Yeah, this is interesting. Daniel's turn call pretty strong. I mean, he could have picked up a draw. If he doesn't snap here on the river, he probably has a pair that turn to draw. Yeah, so that's what I would guess is, you know, Doug maybe gets away with a nice bluff there. He could bluff with like a 9-8 type of hand, small spades, like 4-5 of spades or something. But yeah.
So very likely that like Daniel ended up with like the Jack X of spades or something like that on the river.
It feels like that because a king has to think, even if it's just a king, it has to consider the river, right?
Yeah, 4-bet pot on the left now. First 4-bet pot of the evening gets called. 9-6-5. Definitely good for Daniel, I would say. Wait, sorry.
I mean, honestly, both players do pretty well on these boards.
Yeah.
Doug is going to have a lot of like the middle pocket pairs.
Yeah.
In his range, which means he's going to have like, you know, pair plus draw or sets more often than Daniel.
How would you play those like after the small sizing, like sevens?
I'd consider just fast playing it and getting it in on the flop. I'd also consider calling. I think both plays are pretty good. It kind of depends on if Daniel is like always, if he's dark c betting, if he just bets like every single time on the flop, I would lean towards, you know, raise, fast play, just get it in. It's a good enough hand for 100 big blinds to just get it in on the flop. But if Daniel's a little more cautious with his, like, you know, ace queen, ace king type hands, then it's probably a bit ambitious, and maybe I just go for check call.
So on the right table it goes raise, and then he goes with the big sizing on the flop. Gets called, turns to 6 of spades.
Similar spot to what we saw like early in the session. I'm always interested to see, like, if, you know, if sizing changes in a repeat situation. We just get a check, so I guess we don't learn too much.
So here we usually see, I mean, this sizing from Doug will be dependent on his exact hand, right? I assume.
Yeah,
like,
he can use just kind of like all sorts of things here. He could block bet with, you know, an 8 or a 6. He could bet the way he did. Probably we're looking at like 4x, or maybe a strong 10 with like the sizing he chose there. And then he obviously could have just gone, you know, 2.5 times the pot or something with like a flush.
Yeah, or like some houses maybe. Like that also makes sense. Yeah.
It's hard to balance all, you know, like we're talking about it like it's so easy.
I have jokes.
Whoa. Sorry, my Siri woke up. Not my Siri, my Alexa.
I was like, who is in Christian's house right now and speaking so confidently?
Yeah.
that makes sense that it's
Give me 1 second, let me turn it on.
Yeah.
Which would you like?
I'll follow the action here while Christian steps out. We've got Daniel check raising on this King Jack 6 on table 2 is pretty interesting, because, you know, the 2 high cards, the 2 Broadway cards, typically not that great for Daniel in a single raise pot.
That was a little bit interesting right there.
I covered for you. We got a check raise pot here on table 2, so but Daniel checked on the queen here. I've seen Daniel checking. This is one of those cards where it's like, okay, my obvious bluffing hands, like my queen 10 or queen 9, we turn a marginal hand. So I think it jumps out also to Daniel to say, like, you know, if he has 2 pair here, or he turned a straight, something strong, like find some checks with those hands as well, right?
Yes.
So when Daniel pretty quickly check calls the turn, there we go, two pair. Not too surprising to me. That seems pretty on brand for the way he like builds his strategy to, you know, check to the aggressor or to the aggressive player, with, like, you know, his hand is not thrilled to just like bomb turn jam river, right? Like it's not the best 2 pair hand. But he should find some bets there on the turn as well. I think that's kind of the tricky part in situations like that, is finding like some aggression and some checks to trap.
3-bet pot on the first table. Looks like he gets called ace king 8. We presume.
We've seen a lot of small bets.
Yeah, have to presume he's gonna go with like the 2K. Do you mix here, Kevin? Like, do you have a big bet size?
I would personally. I think double Broadway. There's just like certain hands that are so strong and like so far ahead while the board is like this, like before the flush draw comes in, basically.
Yeah.
Or the straight draw or whatever. There's like certain parts of Daniel's range that are just way ahead, and like Doug doesn't get the option to fold unless the board changes dramatically, right? So like if it's like ace queen versus, you know, ace 5 suited, like Daniel just has so much incentive to get like max in on the flop, max in on the turn, rather than like letting some card come off where ace 5 gets to start folding.
Right, the jack of diamonds or whatever. Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be like that scary, right? Like just like a 10 or something. Interesting that Daniel just shows down the queen jack. That's another, like, you know, high equity hand where he decided not to be aggressive on the turn, similar to that 10-8 we saw earlier in the session. That definitely could be deliberate, just, you know, feeling comfortable to check and continue in some other way.
Interesting. Okay. So is that one of the hands that potentially you would have used the big sizing with?
The queen jack, yeah. It's a pretty, it's just like top tier bluffing hand, right? You know, you have kind of all the best blockers plus the equity. If you're going to choose the large bet, it's a pretty good candidate.
You're just ready to dance with the queen jack, Kevin. Let's go. Like,
yeah, I mean,
we're just gonna go.
If he puts up resistance, like, you know, we fold to raises, but it's like, a great barreling hand.
That's how I see it. Like, as soon as the flop comes out, I'm just like, I'll see you at the river, Doug. It's just like, let's go. Like, we're dancing. Like, big bet, all in. Like, unless something obviously changes, then you know.
I'd be far more surprised to see Doug play that same hand that same way. He doesn't seem like the type to slow down on such an advantageous board.
Got it. No, I agree. Big overbet from Douglas Polk on the right-hand table.
Yeah.
Yep.
I missed the action here.
He gets caught.
Wow.
Have to presume this went
What if it was a triple?
Pot seemed, maybe. Actually, that made sense.
It's a pretty good hand for that. Do we get replayers on this channel? Is that a thing?
Not. I will ask.
I can find out. I have the power to go back on YouTube. Yeah, triple.
It was the triple barrel. Okay, so it was pretty good. It was a good one. The chat is saying, anyone else notice Christian sitting on the right again today? They know, man. They know.
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, they shouldn't have noticed because they wouldn't even be looking to the right? Like, they're like, wait, Christian is commentating today? I didn't even see him. I forgot to look to the right half of the screen.
It's just you. It's all you. All right, let's see.
That's that bluff by Doug. It's not easy to find. I think that's a pretty cool play.
It's underrated.
Triple.
Underrated, right? Like you see someone just like run that, and it's the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's like, like you see someone like they'll be like, "Wow, what a fucking punt," and you're just like, "Wow, that's a really beautiful line." Like it's really hard to find that bluff. It's really different, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just not everyone, you know, triples off with no equity into three of a kind and, like, you know, pats themselves on the back afterwards like, yeah, good, this was fine, this was a good play, you're just unlucky. We ran into trips, like, unlucky, we'll do it again next time.
So small bet from Doug on the first table. He follows through on the turn with roughly 2/3 pot. Daniel he's gonna be pretty linear, like just lots of thin value bets with this sizing sequence, and it's good on a board like this. Daniel calls through with a king high.
Interesting. I think King 7 definitely should continue on the turn. It could probably check raise or check call. Guess I'm not too surprised that Doug checked behind, but he checked awfully quick with a hand that, like, could have considered value betting. Yeah,
I mean, you have top pair on the river.
Yeah,
but the spades did fall, and
spades came in. No spade in his hand. It's a very reasonable check. I'm surprised he checks it so quickly.
3-bet pot on table 1. 9-8 deuce, 2 hearts. Doug goes with the check. What kind of hands would you be stabbing here as Daniel after the flop check for this size?
That's a big bet. I would rarely bet this large when check 2. It's hard for me to pin down, like, a hand that wants to go so big. But I guess if I had to pick, it would be like a 10-9 suited kind of hand, like a pretty strong flopped pair that doesn't exactly have a lockdown on the board. This one's really interesting. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff Daniel could have improved to here. I think like a 9 and a flush are both extremely common.
Yeah, they're both present in his range for sure. I have to expect Doug to. Wow, he goes with the block bet.
Yeah, I was thinking that if Doug does bet here, it was going to be a block. If he has an overpair, Doug could have aces, and aces is not exactly thrilled to put in a big bet on the river. But, if Daniel had Jack 10 or 10-7 or something like that, he doesn't just want to let him check, so I'm not too surprised to see a block. I would have been pretty surprised to see 15K or 20K or something. I think that'd be kind of unusual.
Because then he's more likely to just check, right?
Yeah, exactly. He could just check, and Daniel will value bet trips. He'll value bet a straight or a flush, and there's really no need to put in action with the top of his range there.
3-bet on the right table from Douglas. 4-bet from Daniel Negreanu now.
I remember thinking at the start of this match that the 4-bet frequencies were pretty out of line. Have those leveled off, do you think?
Yeah, we haven't really seen too many 4-bets. They've been more rare.
Yeah. I think it was also hard for me to I watched 200 hands roll out really, really slow in the live event, and then you switch online and it's wow, they're 4-betting every hand, but it was probably five times in 3 hours or whatever. So
right, it's just this is way different. Much. Yeah, it's 2 tables at a higher frequency of hands.
Yeah.
4-liner now after Daniel goes with the turn small bet. I mean, 4 flush. He goes with the check. There's also a 3-bet pot on table number 2. Queen 10-5 rain. Goes with the small bet size. How are you okay, if you have a small bet size and a big bet size, how do you split? Obviously, you should have a little bit of both on both sides, but where are you leaning here?
Yeah, I mean the big, I think the easiest thing to do is think about the big bet as just a very specific range, and then everything else gets the small bet. So the specific range that wants the big bet is really strong, vulnerable hands. So one pair, good one pair sort of hands.
You mentioned it earlier, king queen type of hands.
Yeah. So not your sets on a rainbow board, not your 2 pair, or even pocket aces is probably a bit strong, but anything slightly weaker than that would love to just play a 2 street game. Queen jack, king queen, ace queen, pocket kings, probably the main candidates. Got and it. Then just whatever bluffs you like to match with those hands. Not just trying to blast off when we have good equity necessarily, but probably going for good blockers when you can.
Of course, as we switch over to the other table, a big pot develops on table number 1, and we see the small bet again from Daniel on the river.
And these are we've seen this twice today. Once it was a 4 flush board, now it's a 4 straight board. If there's any spot to bet small on the river in position, these are the ones. And there you see just the exact right type of hand to be betting small. If we go too big there with just a 7, and Doug has plenty of queens available, we just kind of get ourselves into trouble.
He also blocks a jack, which is pretty relevant in terms of getting called, right?
Yeah, that could influence him too. If he just has a7 or something, maybe he bets big, or bigger than that anyways.
So here on the right table.
Oh yeah, what happened here?
So I believe this was a 3-bet pot, and then a check on the. I could have missed this action.
I think it was just under half pot c-bet on the flop, and now we get 3rd pot on the turn. This one's interesting. Doug kind of saying maybe a hand pocket 7s or 8s in his value range, squeak out a little bit of extra value, get a little protection.
Yes.
So I would expect that means on this king, he's either going to check a lot or maybe just go all in. If he has a bluff or a really good hand,
wow.
We see the all in. So this is a cool play. I mean, it's so tough to play against small bet turn, overbet river. It's a real valuable tool in your toolkit, so to speak.
What kind of bluffs would Doug have here?
I think I mean, not that he's thrilled to bluff the river with ace high, but like I'm thinking like kind of a, you know, the turn was a bit mergy, like not exactly a pure bluff, and then on the river it's kind of like, okay, I've got a good blocker, let's go all in. So you know, maybe he finds it with like ace 9 offsuit or whatever, like kind of the low frequency aces in his range. I think that'd be a cool one.
So a situation where like he does have the best hand on the turn sometimes, and then on the river it's just like pretty clear that he has to turn his hand to bluff.
Yeah, I mean the king fell as well, right? So
yeah.
like some of his bluffs are now top pair, which by itself is strong enough to go all in. Like it wouldn't shock me if he had ace king there, and he's value jamming the river. So like, you know, those are the types of I'm thinking like a similar high card hand, but he's using it as a bluff.
Got it. Table 2, this was raise pre-flop, down bet on the flop. Gets called by Daniel, turn 10 of hearts. Everything relatively in line so far. I think Doug will have a lot of available bluffs on this turn, right?
Yeah, once he chooses to check, you know, we're kind of drawing from like nothing hands, like low equity hands, I guess.
I mean, like Doug will have a lot of available bluffs on the turn with like Queen Jack, Queen 9, etc. after c-betting the flop. His overbet gets called, and the backdoor flush draw fills.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting card because, you know, the types of bluffing hands that Doug will go big with will improve here, but also the types of hands that Daniel calls an overbet with are going to improve here. Both ranges pretty equity driven.
Overbet line gets called. That's a flush.
Wow, quick call. Got to be like a 2-pair hand, or maybe even Queen Jack.
And that's going to bring, you know, the lead a little bit further for Doug Polk. What are your thoughts there on that overbet line by Doug?
Yeah, really good. I think he kind of nailed it with the sizing there. I think when you overbet the turn and get called, a lot of Daniel's check calls are going to be like, you know, ace high flush draws or like flush draws with pairs. So going all in on the river, like even though he has a flush and it's heads up, like going all in for 3 times the pot, I think would just be like excessive. With a weak flush, I think he's going to want to have like a queen high flush or an ace high flush to go for such a big size.
I definitely want your thoughts on this hand. So on table 2, it goes raise call, the small sizing B20 on the flop, gets check raised from Doug. What kind of hands are you check raising on the flop here? Like some 4-5, some what else?
Yeah, I mean, you know, just like the obvious value hands, I suppose, are just like the 2 pairs that Doug flats pre-flop, right? So like ace 3 offsuit and ace 9 offsuit, they're not exactly in a situation where they're trying to trap. So there's still going to be plenty of check raises, even though it's an ace high board. I guess for bluffs, I mean, at this point, it's also relatively likely that he's holding a jack because he checked the turn and check called it. So like, you know, queen jack or jack 10 or jack 8 kind of hand, like wrapped around the 9. Oh, he ends up with a king 9, which, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's frustrating to play against someone who has like the right type of distribution in their check raise, so that like, you know, you get that jack on the river and you're thinking like, what's he gonna fold? Like, I'm assuming Daniel just gave up a bluff, right?
Yeah.
You get to that river and you're like, oh, you know, he's gonna have some jacks, he's gonna have some ace X, like what can I really get him to fold here? So you check behind and then he shows you the pair of 9s and it's like,
yeah.
Oh, probably could have gotten him to fold that. Like that's
right, exactly, that's true.
It's frustrating to play against someone with well-designed ranges like that, where you've just got like a little bit of everything.
So here, this is a 3-bet pot on table number 2. Doug goes with the c-bet, bigger c-bet, takes it down. This pot on table number 1, Daniel chose the big size on the flop, got called. The turn, he checked back. River's a 9 of hearts. Definitely a good card for Doug. He goes with the small bet size. Gets called 5-4 versus ace 5. Seems reasonable by both players, I think.
Yeah, I don't think Doug has to block bet, but you know he's going to want to put a little bit more money into the pot there.
And the break. So far, Douglas is up 40,000. I don't think it's I don't think anybody thinks that I am non-biased, so I am not happy that Daniel is down, and that's fine. Whatever. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I did say before the match that I was going to put a little action against Doug today. I'm certainly not. I like went the whole way too. I went for Daniel winning more than 60K.
Ooh,
was my yeah, that's my bet today. So I'm gonna need some help.
I have Daniel also today, so we're both on the hook right now.
Yeah.
Okay, what are your thoughts so far of this match today from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, cards are obviously in Doug's favor. I think that he's been playing pretty sharp though. Like it's pretty common in a heads-up match with like how many flops you take and like how many spots you get to just to make some errors, and I don't remember seeing like any major blunders at this point. So that's just a good sign for for the player who's running well, which in this case has been Doug so far. It can definitely be frustrating to be in Daniel's spot and come out and like he probably hasn't made any large mistakes, but pretty much every close spot has gone in Doug's favor. So it's going to be interesting to see if he, I don't want to say like bounces back. It's not like he's down that much, but he's just going to have to keep playing well and trusting the process a little bit.
How many buy-ins you think on a match like this? I haven't had the pleasure of talking to someone that plays like strictly heads up. Like, how many buy-ins of quote-unquote run bad? Like, if you were playing someone, let's say you were playing someone that you consider to be also very good, right? So give me a random name, like that's good.
Last person I played was Polly Iris.
Okay, so
Iris. Yeah.
So you're playing him. How many buy-ins down until you start thinking like, okay, maybe this guy's actually better than me?
Yeah, that's tricky because like, I mean, heads-up players are stubborn. Like we don't ever like if you admit defeat like to anyone, it's like an admission of it feels like an admission of just being bad,
Yeah.
Because like there's nothing else to blame. Like there's no like, oh, like this format, like yeah, I think like I've definitely played against players where my lifetime results were minus 30 buy-ins or more, and have not always thought that those players were better than me, but I think that's like getting to the point where there's a lot of evidence against you. But I've also seen players lose like 50 buy-ins and then end up ahead long term. So like the variance can be pretty wild, and I usually like emphasize just kind of looking at like data on play style more than like data on how much have I lost so far, because you can pretty much just like you can see any amount of losing. You could certainly lose 80 or 100 buy-ins on like a 1% bad run and just have been break even or something like that in reality.
Big pot on table number 2 as Doug wins there. Man, so you can lose 30 buy-ins and just you're still better than the person.
Well, at least I might think that I am. Yeah, I mean, like when looking at like betting on this match, I've gone to kind of like my variance calculator, my preferred variance calculator, where you can just kind of look at percentage of outcomes over the course of however many hands it is that you're interested in. And yeah, I mean the matches that they're playing here, like every day, these players are for the most part like within 5% of 50-50 for like who's going to win. But then you're also probably like 10% or so to just like run away and win 10 buy-ins like on any given day, which is like, that's just one session. Like not even talking about like stacking a few sessions next to each other. So you can see some pretty wild stuff. Obviously, we saw in the Galfond challenge a few months ago some pretty wild swings, and like the variance in heads up PLO is not that much different from the variance in heads up no limit.
All right, so we see two kind of big pots here. So it went small bet on the flop, big bet on the turn, and Daniel wins with ace 4 on the left table. Seems relatively interesting there that Doug didn't fire the third shell.
Yeah, good chance that he just, he's going to have a lot of different bluffing hands. We already saw him go for it with like the 10-8 of clubs on the ace-ace X board. So, some stuff he's just going to give up. He might have had a bit of showdown value himself. He might have had a flush draw or something and didn't want to use that hand to bluff river.
Makes sense. The 10-8 of clubs is the glory hand. That was the glory hand. The hand where, you show it to a random person, they're like, you're a fucking idiot. And then you show it to Kevin Rabichow, he's like, wow, this guy, he knows what he's doing. It's like...
It's hard to show me just like one hand in heads up and for me to think like, oh, that was definitely bad. Like you have to make like a pretty fundamental error at some point for me to look at like a single hand and think like, oh yeah, that was played awful.
So Doug goes with the flop overbet on table number 1, which is something I definitely want to talk to you about. So 8-7-3 rainbow after he goes with the flop overbet. What are these hands?
Yeah, this is pretty centered around like small overpairs as far as like the favorite hands to take that line. So 8-7-3, just super safe board for like pocket 9s through pocket jacks, and those hands are crushing at the moment. So like kind of just go for the maximum right now before the king or the ace rolls off at some point in the hand, or the 6 or the 5 or whatever. Doug checks back and loses to top 2, which is interesting, to not see a check raise from Daniel. It's definitely an advantageous spot to consider check raising, but I can understand wanting to protect your check calls when like, a very aggressive player has shown 2 really big bets.
Yeah.
But the fact that Doug just kind of casually checked behind the river makes me think that those like 9s, 10s, or jacks kind of hands was pretty likely what he had, because that would be pretty thin on the river.
You like the pot size bet with those hands on the turn as well?
Yeah, I think the queen is like one of the safest cards, other than like a deuce or something like that. Like the queen or like the king, once you've bet really big on the flop, Daniel's not going to be floating, queen jack. King jack, king queen. He's not going to float those hands.
Nice. Okay, so then you make him have to call with like an 8 or whatever, and then you still get a lot of value. That's fine.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like you put maximum pressure. If Daniel doesn't click call with a bunch of 8s and 7s, then he's just going to be folding way too much, and Doug gets to bluff everything.
Check raise on table number 1 after the small bet size. So these small check raises, they seem to be rather effective / commonly used from Doug. Is that something that you do as well? He tends to do these on like the paired boards, the monotone boards, these like small check raises after the small c bet.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a little bit player dependent. It's certainly fine to raise small, but like being the out of position player, I don't usually want to offer such a great price for like the in position player to float me. And there's definitely like a certain type of player who's just gonna like, oh yeah, you're giving me like 3-1 when I have 2 overcards, like I'm never folding kind of player. It's not necessarily like the right way to play, but usually players are on one side or the other. They're total maniacs and they never fold, or they're like very regimented and they just kind of like follow the hand strength that they want to follow. And I would only use the small size against the second player type.
A little bit of exploits for my man Kevin out there,
I mean, there's nothing but exploits in a heads-up match. It's like, obviously the theory is really well understood because it's such like a simple game structure, but the Every hand you're trying to find an exploit. Guaranteed Doug is trying to find an exploit every single hand.
A lot of people would say like heads up, no limit, high stakes. Like no one's playing like exploitative poker.
Oh, that's definitely not true. That's like everyone's playing exploitative poker. Every single player in high stakes heads up is playing exploitative poker.
All right, you heard it here first. No, I mean, I think that's like a common thing. Like most people would say, like, no, like K-Rab is probably just like playing only GTO or whatever. Like,
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like the way I approach the game is like probably closer tied to theory than most.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you're not trying to find exploits, you're just like leaving money on the table. And like there's only 2 players, so like you're gonna learn so much. You're gonna learn like every single little thing about your opponent as you play them. So it would be, just be silly not to be trying to exploit them in some way.
So on this board, it went 3-bet check from Daniel, 2,700 on the flop, call, check turn, river ace of hearts. Daniel checks again.
I'm really curious what Daniel does on the river here with a hand like ace jack or ace queen or something. He ends up with just the queen X. Pretty standardly played hand, I would say.
How often are we 3-betting these kind of hands, like the queen 5? Jack
not
4?
Not much. I don't think it would be wise for either player to just pure 3-bet like, ragged offsuit hands like that. But if they've got their randomizer open and they're doing, like 10% on a few queen X and 10% on a few king X, like that's probably about right.
Got it. We got the exploitative randomizers out today.
I mean, I did a training video where I showed recently like how I kind of broke down like I know like what the solver outputs are, or at least like the ones that I've generated, like for how to play pre-flop heads up at 100 big blinds. But there's just like so much detail in there to try and copy it would just be like pointless. It would take so much effort to like, memorize your 2% versus your 5% versus your 15% frequencies. Like just cut away like the unnecessary noise, right? And just like simplify to 10% of this hand category and 20% of this hand category and 75% of that hand category, and you'll come close, and that's good enough.
Which table you want? The left table? We always go with the fucking left table, don't we? It's too much, man.
I've been watching table 2, nothing else. Got a 4 to a straight, 3 to a flush.
Roughly 2/3 on the river. So this can be, how far down can Doug go for value? Like top 2?
Yeah, I would guess. Oh wow, big check raise here. I think when you get into 2-pair, like you're kind of mixing. Like, having a spade would be nice. If you can have kind of like the cards that make it less likely for Daniel to have a straight, that would be nice.
This is an interesting little match so far, I think.
There's definitely there's been perhaps even more showdowns than average, which is nice. Although I'm happy to speculate about how they're playing their ranges before we see the showdowns, but there's definitely been like good card distribution for talking strategy.
All I know is the next time some dude at 1020 is like opening the fucking button and I have the queen 5 off, I'm just gonna be like, listen, I'm throwing the 10%,
Go for it.
Just gonna be like, throwing the 10% or shoot him up a little bit quick. I'm sure it's a little different, but you know what I'm saying.
That's a common one when I talk to 6-max players. Like one of the first things usually is like, you're not 3-betting enough in the big blind. It's super common.
No, it makes sense for sure. It's like, I don't want to talk too much because like I don't want people to know that I'm 3-betting them with like the queen 10 suit is getting 3-bet a little bit. It's like that's probably one of the slam dunk ones though.
I think it's just like, yeah, it's just easy to click call with a hand that like looks marginal, right? Daniel's shutting down a bluff there on table 2.
So one of the critiques that I've seen is that, like, at least from what we've seen, we don't really know, right? Because we don't know what Daniel's candidates are. But the critiques that I've seen is that Doug is being able to show down marginal hands more often than Daniel's being able to show down marginal hands. So, you know, it's hard to say, right? Because we don't know the hands, but I guess that's something that we'll just keep an eye on for the rest of the match, and something that if you see again, I guess we'll commentate on, you know?
Yeah, sorry, I just lagged for a second there, but I did hear what you said. Wasn't sure how long of a pause I just took.
It was like 4 seconds.
But yeah, I think there's like, you know, there's a lot of spots you end up in where it feels like there's no point in being more aggressive than you're being. Like it feels like you're not accomplishing anything with like whatever it is that you're doing. But like it's exactly what you were just talking about, which is like letting your opponent show down the winner, or like letting your opponent realize equity with a marginal hand. That's kind of like the hidden, you know, flaw in a lot of passive strategies.
Yeah.
So I would definitely agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, so it's something I guess we'll just like keep an eye on for the rest of the match to see if like maybe Daniel's doing it too much or who knows, right? Daniel goes with the big size on table number 2, gets the king. So here we would just like value bet as far down as like any good 8, I assume, for another big bet on the turn.
Yeah, the king, you know, similar to before, like Doug might find a few king high floats, especially king high hearts on this board against the big c bet, but like it's not a big part of his range. So if Daniel has an 8 or 9s through queens or something like that, it's just kind of an easy value bet, maybe even 3 streets.
Daniel goes with the block bet, gets called. He has 8-7, and he's gonna take it down. So we have to presume that Daniel probably just had like maybe a 4, maybe some ace high combos, something along those lines.
Yeah, pretty likely it's just, yeah, exactly those hands, and they shouldn't really be folding to that bet size.
Sticking with table number 2, flop goes check check. Daniel gets caught on a bluff on table number 1 after checking back the turn.
There's another one, open ender, no turn bluff.
Yeah, interesting there.
Seems to be a pattern.
How often are you checking? So on the flop here, after you go check check on 7-5-5, 2 clubs. What kind of hands are you like checking back? Like, is it a plethora of hands? Like, are you checking back some overpairs? Are you checking back hands like this? Like, how are you constructing a check back there?
Yeah, you don't have to play a lot of them, but certainly, you know, good queen high through bad ace high is kind of like the set of hands that makes the most sense. Like those are the hands that kind of want to check, so to speak, but you know, they certainly don't have to check all the time. So I think you just kind of build out around that, like build out some traps and like some overpairs and like the occasional draw to like protect those hands. But you know, by and large, it's just kind of king high ish hands.
Mm-hmm. Table number 1, Doug goes with the overbet, takes it down. Table number 2, check check turn after the c bet call on flop, turn 5 of clubs. So here I presumed Daniel can value bet any 9, checks down king 8. I think that's fairly okay. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's not like just that hand class. Like the 10 coming on the river improves a lot of Daniel's hands. So like when you go down to a pair of 8s, I don't think you need to always be betting or always be checking. He probably wants to do some of both. So, you know, choice of hand there seems totally fine to me. But I would definitely block bet with some 8s.
3 bet from Doug, 10-6 deuce. He could go a myriad of sizings here. He chooses half pot. Is that a size that you would see often here, like half pot?
I think it's pretty good, actually. This board in particular, Doug has a number of, like, I guess I'll call them like medium strength value hands. He has like, you know, 7s through 9s and like ace king high type hands, which are actually like totally fine to value bet. And then when you start looking at like jacks, queens, kings, aces, like they just don't really care as much. Like there's not a lot of draws on this board, so they're not like desperate to bet huge and jam turn. So it just kind of like, I think because those thin value bets are like happy to bet half pot here, he can just kind of like push most of his betting strategy into that sort of size. So I think that's a good one on this board.
Turn goes check check on the jack of spades. River now 6.
It seems pretty likely. I mean, Daniel's going to have some 6x. He's going to have some 10x. But he's also going to have much weaker than that, a fair bit as well. I think Doug has like an interesting spot if he has like pocket 9s or 8s, because, you know, those aren't great at bluff catching either. But I do think if he has a 10, like check snap is kind of the line, or like an ace deuce or like an ace king kind of hand, I think like check and just kind of have to call.
So you just don't really want to block like 7-8, 9-8 type of hands, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Daniel should also have like 4-5 suited. There's just like there's a lot of air hands that get to this point. For sure he has 10x. I mean, he should be value betting this size in this spot, I think, with just like any 10, any 6, that this seems like the play.
Takes it down. What about the turn? Like, how often is Doug betting like king queen, ace queen type of hands on the turn?
Probably just sometimes. Like those hands are pretty good, right? They kind of get to take their pick of like, do I want to bluff or do I want to check and try to show down? So I don't know exactly how Doug's like. I would just expect him to play a mix of those types of hands. I don't think they're all going to bet. I don't think they're all going to check.
The people want to know, have you ever played Polk heads up and who won?
I did. We played 2 sessions on ACR when he had those private tables set up. I think we might have broken even, or the first session I ran amazing, and I think I won like 2.5 or 3 buy-ins in like an hour or 2 hours or something. The second session, I want to say we broke even. Yeah, maybe I finished up on him actually, because I think those were the only. I think I had an even session and a winning session.
Okay, well there you go. That's why I put my money on you. I don't know.
It was pretty funny when that happened. Like, you know, I have Doug asking me if we're gonna play again because he's like taking all this crossbook action, but at the same time, like neither of us was neither of us was trying to like hurry to arrange a match against each other. Like he was like a few weeks out from playing Daniel, and I was like not playing heads up full time at all. Like I was totally doing other stuff. I was just like, if I had free time, I was like happy to play, right?
You should have told me that. I would have got a price at least. Like been like, nah, I mean my man's cooking right now. Like
I think that's why he booked it in the way that he did, where it was just like a crossbook and not like, you know, a fixed bet of some kind, because then it's just like, then it's easy. It's like if we play, we play. If we don't, we don't.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting how that came up. Like it was kind of like out of nowhere. I was just like, yeah, if they play, I got K-Rab. And then he was like, what? K-Rab? I'll play K-Rab. And I'm like, okay, like, sure. Like,
yeah.
I mean, and that's when I hit you up. I hit you up and I was like, hey, like, can I take a piece of your action? And then he didn't know that I told you that. And then, like, all of a sudden, he's like, why are you backing out of the crossbook? I was like, no, man, I just bought action from K-Rab. Like, relax. But whatever, yeah. It's all good. I mean, I'll still do it. I still got money on you. Don't worry. All right.
I think it's just on if we ever play, but I don't know why he would play at this point. Like he's got a pretty important match, and then he's heading home to retire afterwards, right?
Yeah, I think so. All right. So 2 interesting pots on the right table. Doug goes with the flop overbet, gets called. Turn brings the double flush draw. On the left table, Doug goes with like the 3/4 pot, gets check raised on ace queen deuce.
Wait, yeah, this one's really interesting. He check raised.
He check raised on the left.
And Daniel 3-bet on the flop. So like small sizes by both of them, like small flop c-bet, small check raise, small flop 3-bet. If Doug does not have, pocket deuces in that situation, like he's just kind of got a tough time continuing. But Daniel just checking on the 3 is pretty interesting. There's not a lot of hands. I mean, maybe like an ace king or like an ace jack type hand that's like thin value on the flop, doesn't like the gutter completing on the turn.
Goes with the block bet now and takes it down.
Yeah, it feels like Daniel just had, some kind of bluff that thought that Doug was light.
So 4-5 filled, so it had to be something like Queen Jack Jack 10 that didn't choose to float, but rather 3-bet.
I mean, it doesn't have to be like an equity hand that he 3-bets the flop with. It could be like King 5 offsuit. It could be 10-9 or something, like just kind of pseudo equity.
The backdoor equity.
That's the type of hand I would choose as well, but like, the probably best hands are like bottom pair. If we're going after him like for multiple streets there. But since the deuce paired on the river, I have a feeling it wasn't bottom pair.
No, I doubt it. That was okay. So effectively, we're 3-betting the flop with like the King 5, 10-9 to find future street bluffs, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's also just like, we're trying to, how do I say it? Like if Doug's check raise bluffs or like his light check raises come from like gut shots, then it's kind of nice to have cards that like interact with those same gut shots when we're rebluffing. That's why I like named those hands in particular, because like, if Doug's bluffing with like the 4-5 offsuit and we have a 5 in our hand or something, like we're just like performing better versus that range by like blocking his outs and like interacting with the same cards that he's going to interact with a little bit. So that's like a weird solver thing you'll see where it's just like card sharing with what your opponent's representing.
3-bet, 4-bet now on table number 2. Table number 2 got some love. There you go. You win the pot, Daniel.
I think we've only seen Daniel 4-bet today. Have we seen Doug 4-bet at all?
No. I agree with you there. I have not seen him 4-bet. Big bet from Daniel, 75% on the turn ace after the C-bet on the flop. Sorry. This had to be check raised on the flop? Or, yeah.
I think it's a turn probe from...
from Daniel.
Turn probe from Daniel.
Yeah. Agreed.
Jack 9 checking behind on the flop. Definitely not like a high frequency play, but I think Doug takes a certain approach. Like part of his approach is built the way that he like kind of taught that upswing course, and I think that part of his approach is like informed by the solver study he's done in recent months. I see like. I was telling him this actually when we played, like before this match started, like part of his game seems like totally like modern and up to date today, and other part of his game is like it throws me back like to when I started playing heads up, and I'm like, oh shit, I've seen this line before, like probably from you in 2011 or something. Like it's funny to see like those things kind of like juxtaposed in his strategy. It's cool for me.
We're seeing a fair amount of flop overbet too. So the flop came King Jack 7, the pot was 1800, and Doug, he chose, it was King Jack 7 rainbow, King Hearts, Jack of clubs, 7 of diamonds, and Doug chose 2300 into 1900. So what kind of, I mean, that's just like not that common. I mean, at least not that I've seen. Like, what are your, like, what hands are those? King Jack 7 for value? Like, is it like a King Queen? Doesn't feel natural there. What do you think?
I think that's like the thin part of the range that goes for it. But I think you're just more likely to see it from like bottom 2 or like a set. Like it's maybe even pushing like a bit stronger, because we're talking like single raise pot with infinite behind. Like there's just a lot of money that needs to go in. If you get a board where you're concerned that the big blind just isn't going to check raise you. Because like King Jack 7, like pretty good board for the button, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all high cards, big blind doesn't have any of the sets. They probably don't have top 2 pair. So like you just don't check raise that much as the big blind on that board.
Right.
So if you flop 2 pair or a set, like how else are you going to get money in unless you just start overbetting on the flop, right? So I think that's kind of the logic. Like when you get a few of those like 3 street trying to get all the money in type hands,
start big.
Yeah, you can just start big.
Yeah, because you don't expect check raise to come in almost ever. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Standard bet size on the flop on 10-4 deuce. I believe he chose. I don't think it was the small bet size. He got called. Turn 8. Check check. Daniel also, after the check on turn, chose the big bet size on table number 2. Takes that one down. Daniel checks on table number 1. Probably some like 4x hands, some 2x hands, some ace highs.
Yeah, I've definitely seen like when all these draws miss the way that they've missed here. I think we've seen Daniel willing to check like a hand as weak as Jack high or Queen high or something on the river, which is definitely fine. Like it's kind of the correct adjustment, but a little bit different from the approach I'm used to seeing out of Doug, which is just like if he has 6 high, he'll bet like one size, and if he has Queen high, he'll just bet like a bigger size or something like that. But that definitely makes it hard. Like Doug makes a good value bet there with pocket 7s. It just means that Doug gets to like value bet thinner in position, and Daniel's kind of in that like guessing spot a little bit more often.
Another 4-bet from Daniel. He's gonna win. Now he's 3-betting. A 3-bet also on table number 2. Doug takes that down. One of the longer tanks from Doug, maybe a 4-bet does come in on table number 1.
Yeah, pretty rare that you, probably just sizing up a little bit because they are 150 big blinds deep here. So I'm guessing his preset wasn't exactly the way he wanted it.
Wow. All of it.
Quick jam. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Daniel was not messing around.
It's always interesting, like I feel like, I haven't been paying attention to timing too close, but I know that like timing is something they've like even between the two of them, they've discussed like how they feel about timing and like people who tank or people who play slow or whatever. And it's always interesting to me when like I see someone make like a complicated decision like that and just like no hesitation, right?
It's always ace king. What do you mean?
It's always it is always ace king.
It's always ace king. Like what are you talking about?
It's always ace king until like you get 3 levels into that thought process, and you're like, as Doug is tanking, like sizing his 4-bet, you're sitting on like aces. You're like, I'm just gonna snap jam, like hovering, like waiting for it. As soon as he 4-bets, I'm gonna go all in.
Snap jam. Oh, there you go. Like now you're deep in the mix.
That was the heads up that I learned when I first started playing, was just like everything was a leveling game.
I feel like
opponent thinks this, so you're going to do this, and if they know that they're doing this, then you're going to do that.
Big overbet after the check from Daniel. Let's see how this hand played out. It's called 8's full. So on the turn there, Daniel checked. I'm replaying it back here. We get the sizing for you all after that hand. Pot was 2,600, Jack 8-7, all diamonds.
So that was just 3 streets Doug went for in a single raise pot. Yeah.
Right. 2/3 on the turn, and then went for the big bomb on the river. We have to presume Daniel just like landed with a jack a fair amount and just like had to call. Maybe Jack with a diamond in his hand.
And I think that's just like kind of the clever part of going, straightforward aggressive line, big sizing with a hand like pocket 8s, is just knowing that when you have 2 8s in your hand, Daniel's either going to have like a missed flush draw or a jack pretty often. So there's just a clear preference for that hand to bet big on turn and river.
When you face overbet, how are you splitting your calls? So like you have a jack here, you have flushes, you could have a straight. How are you ranking your hand? So like would you say like a jack with a diamond is worth more than 9-10? No diamond? Like how would you split here?
Right, I see what you're saying. Like I guess the way I'm thinking about it is like Doug would not bet that big with just a jack because he's relying on if Daniel was to just like kind of rank his hands like best to worst and just call the best of them on the river, like a big chunk of that would just be Jack X. So it would be kind of reckless by Doug to like have a jack in his hand, say Queen Jack or something, and to like bet that big and just expect to get snapped off by like something worse, right? So I think we can like pretty safely rule that out, which means like having the jack by itself is like not actually worth that much. Like it's noteworthy, but it's not like a slam dunk by itself. Let's maybe watch this 4-bet pot before I go too far down the rabbit hole of a hand that's already off screen.
So 4-bet call, Queen 7-4. Daniel will have like a fair amount of Queen X's, maybe some like King Queen suited, Ace Queen. He'll also have like 9s and 10s in there as well. Check back from Doug.
Yeah, interesting check behind. I think there's like a pretty small group of hands that wants to check. And, certainly when you think about like pre-flop bluffs, you could find some random stuff that Doug might want to check. If he just has like Ace 7 off or just an air ball, just like Jack 10 or something. Like maybe these are hands that check sometimes. But for value, like kind of feels like pocket jacks or maybe queens that's trapping and like not much else.
Interesting there. So both players probably just landed with like a section of their range that like had to play relatively passive.
Yeah, I am curious about Daniel's spot is not easy either. Like there are a lot of queens in the pre-flop calling range. He probably should be pretty aggressive on the turn there when Doug checks behind. But if Doug's aggressive when check two, doesn't really have to be aggressive there, right? He can certainly play a lot of his ranges check and just react to the bet. But I certainly wouldn't want to be check folding too much in that situation.
Got it. Certain people in the chat saying this is the best stream by far, Caps by far, in terms of strategy. Please bring Kevin around as much as possible. Someone says yes to that. So effectively, we've fired Matt Berkey, hired Kevin Rabichow for the rest of this challenge, and that's the end of it. He will permanently take the left camera, and we move forward. All right, 3-bet pot on the left. I believe this went 3-bet from Daniel, check on the flop, probe from Doug, and a call.
Yeah. Pretty small bet from Doug, which is good on the flop, and now he just starts bombing. So he's going straight for I've got Queen X. Let's play for stacks. That's pretty much what this bet means.
Yes. So how do you defend versus that bet? Like, do you need like what like?
It's so
yeah,
hard.
I know. I'm asking
honestly
questions.
Yeah, it's so hard. You're kind of like. Yeah, you're just kind of in the bin. You just like you take all the bluff catchers that really don't love bluff catching and you call them sometimes. Like pocket aces is your best bluff catcher.
Yeah.
Hopefully Daniel's finding like the flop check call, turn check with that hand. Really big bet on table 2 as we say that.
First overbet we've seen from Daniel.
Wow, this was a single raise pot.
Yes.
Interesting. So Daniel's using the same play here that I was talking about.
It was a single raise pot, but sorry, not to cut you off. Daniel check raised the flop.
Yeah, he check raised flop and bet really small on the turn.
Yeah.
So he takes that line, that we saw Doug use before, which was like block bet the turn, maybe it's something marginal, but maybe it's the top of his range. And then once he gets called, like some of that top of his range is just going to bet huge on the river. Pretty tough spot in Doug's shoes. Would be nice to see what he had there.
Break number 2 for the players. Remember, guys, that we are scheduled for a 2-hour match, but the players do have the option to continue. And that has happened relatively often.
Yeah, they played a long one on Monday, didn't they?
Yeah, they played an extra long one. I had to order sushi in the middle of the match.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking while Daniel's sitting out, I might take 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. Let's see what's happening right now. K-Rab giving lessons. Yes, K-Rab is one of the best heads-up players, period, on the planet. Daniel is back. And we're off and running. Three bet right off the jump from Daniel Negreanu takes it down. Doug Polk, as you see, winning 55,000 on this session so far. Big bet from Daniel, takes it down. Got a message saying, stop texting. You know, I gotta take care of the mamacitas, man. There's a long stream. Sometimes they need a little bit of love out there. They can't just be like, missing the kid. And then they start thinking like, oh, what are you doing? Who are you talking with? Like, blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? You gotta take care of your business, Can't be fucking around. Then you get in trouble. K-Rab, good looking guy, but he's not as good looking as those mamacitas, you know what I'm saying? Three bet on table number 1. 876, not a great board for Daniel as we see him check. He will be checking here high frequency of the time. I expect small sizing from Doug as we do see him use. Ace is going to be fairly good for Daniel, who have a fair amount of like ace 10 that flow to the flop, some ace 9 that flow to the flop, maybe some ace king that flow to the flop as well. If Doug bets, I do expect slightly bigger sizing. He does choose to check back. Three-fourth pot. This probably does contain a fair amount of ace X. I think you could go as far down as like queens, jacks for value. Takes it down. Table number 2. Daniel in the tank lets the 6 show down. Wish my man was here for that one. That's what I've been saying. Like, I feel as if Daniel's been able to, like, giving Doug the availability to show down a little bit too much for my liking, but it's hard to know without knowing the hands. Table number 1, Doug chose the small bet size on the flop, got called. Daniel will have a fair amount of floats here, 4-5, 4-6, 5-4s, 7-X's, etc. Daniel has shown a propensity to check here on this river a fair amount. Let's see what he chooses now. He does choose to check. Table number 2. Daniel chose B75 on the turn, 75% pot. Gets called top house, 11,500. Ricky is heading off back to Vegas. I'm letting him know that we've just officially hired Kevin Rabichow for the rest of all Heads Up streams. And that's it. Moving on with it. 3-bet from Daniel on table number 2. Four bet from Doug Polk. Last time this happened, we saw Daniel rip it in. So far, that has not happened. He gets the call, 25,000 in the middle. We saw Doug check back last time. I do think if we see a bet, it's going to be relatively small. The SPR is 2. Daniel will have some jacks here. Both players might have that hand. 9s, 10s, 7s, all in Daniel's range. I expect Daniel to have a fair amount of bets here. He does have Jack X, pocket 9s, pocket 10s. As we see Kevin return. This is a 4-bet pot, Kevin.
Nice. Doug's first 4-bet?
Second 4-bet. He's done
Doug's.
2 of them since
break. Yeah.
And this went check. We saw another check from Daniel. I expected a fair amount of like small turn probe from Daniel, but we didn't see it. And now he's facing roughly 2/3 again. So this might be a similar range of hands that you mentioned earlier, or maybe there's some traps as well now.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's looking like Daniel just does a lot of checking in that situation, and he certainly could have had like some turned equity, although he check folded, so I doubt he had too much equity. But definitely interesting what Doug's going to check behind. I think like traps are fairly likely again, because all the marginal stuff is just sort of happy to bet small on the flop. Yeah, sorry for my delay. I have a little bit of early Thanksgiving food on the stove. Just wanted to put it in the fridge.
How much do you charge for this chef madness, man? I mean,
the Instagram is free. That's all I got. There's nothing else going on.
Yeah, but if I get a little bit of some mamacitas in my DM, and I'm like, listen, I got a chef that he's kind of like my friend. How much I gotta throw you? How much I gotta throw you?
I mean, it sounds like you could just say that, but but if you're looking for like recipe consulting, we can talk. Okay, cheap hourly rate. Yeah.
Okay, all right, sounds good. All right, I gotta keep this in mind. You never know.
I'm a big fan of cooking at home.
I might need some I might hit you up for different style of recipes. Like, hey, listen, Kevin, I'm trying to get in shape. What are these? Yep. Or like, listen, Kevin, it's Valentine's Day. What are these? Like, listen, Kevin, my dog is sick. What do I feed him?
Yeah, I need like a mailing list, like a weekly, seasonally appropriate. What are you cooking for this week?
You never know, man. It might be your second career. Like, just like the next thing I see is like Iron Chef Kevin.
Yeah, I entertained that idea for like about a year or so, and then I realized I just like cooking at home and eating the food that I make. I'm not too big on being a chef.
You have. I think I saw you have a significant other, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so lucky girl. She gets. That's not common, like.
Yeah. She doesn't like every now and then, kind of like today, I guess. Every now and then I won't make food, and it's like, oh God, what do I do now?
Big check raise from Daniel on table number 2. Takes it down.
I like that sizing. That was like, 4x with the threat of getting, maybe stacks in on the river, maybe at least like 2/3 of stacks in on the river. It's going to be good for a lot of just like weak flushes, which he's going to have a lot of.
Big bet size from Daniel on table number 2, Jack 9-7, relatively dynamic board. You like that?
I usually bet like half pot on those boards. I think those are the boards where like the solver would just tell you like everything's fair game. Like there's just a lot of everything. I don't think there's like a clear favorite because you just have so many different types of hands in a heads up range. You've got like your weak pairs. You've got like your sets. You've got your medium strength pairs that are doing okay and maybe have backdoor equity. There's just like a lot of different categories that you could go with.
3-bet pot on table number 1, King Jack 3. Doug has been using a myriad of sizing on this board today. Now he goes with small size. Takes it down.
I've noticed Doug's small size is not as small as Daniel's small size.
Yeah,
I'm actually partial. I'm partial to the smaller bets in that kind of situation, like or just in general. Like I think Daniel's small size is a little bit better in those spots.
So Daniel chooses like the 20%. I think Doug is like closer to like the 30%.
Yeah.
Sizing. I find these boards interesting on table number 1, where it's like these boards were like the.
Wow, Doug just shows down the 10 high, no draw. Sorry to cut you off, but table 2, yeah, he got away with one there. Just gave up on a bluff, and Daniel had a missed flush draw.
Yeah, I mean, there was another pot was when you stepped away where Daniel didn't like bluff a certain combo, and then Doug was able to show down, which I was like hoping you were here because I was like, oh, like we kind of spoke about this a little bit, but. Okay, so now this flop on table number 1, this went c-bet on the flop, call, turn check. Now, I assume that Daniel gets to bluff this a fair amount.
Yeah, these are, bet sizing is a little bit tricky here because there's, like Daniel's going to have just some 2-pair hands that aren't that great, but he's also going to have some straights or better. And it's not always obvious like what size for what bluffs and that kind of thing, like where to draw the line. But I think that just a general rule of thumb, if he just does a lot of betting, that's a good thing. Oh, Doug with a little thin value bet, yeah. That's pretty, Daniel snap called. It feels like he just had a 6, like 6s and 3s, loses to 6s and 4s. That's
how thin
kind of a cooler.
How thin can you bet as like Daniel? Like, so you said like you want to see a fair amount of betting. Like how much betting?
I think like basically any pair on the board is fair game. Like it's just a relatively small pot, and it's quite easy for Doug to have like high card hands that don't get to just like auto fold. Because Daniel's got missed draws too, right? Like Daniel can just have 9 high, 10 high, jack high. So if he bets small, like Doug has a real decision with just everything. He has a real decision with like queen jack or something, just like random queen high.
Yeah, got it. Daniel chooses the big size. It's hard sometimes with like the Daniel Doug name, very similar name.
Doug trying to launch the check raise didn't work out there on table 2.
Yeah. Polly says, thanks for having one of the best specialists to give us fish some insight. 7 exclamation marks. And some commentary on what they might be thinking.
I appreciate the chat. You guys have a nice audience. They've been a little too kind so far.
I've been hyping you up all week. I've been like, listen, we're gonna have Kevin.
Yeah.
You guys are gonna learn things. I'm gonna learn things because I don't know heads up like that, you know, like, and I'm learning as much as they are. Like, I'm just like, okay, yeah, okay, so we want to flop over bet with, I got it, boom. We want to 3-bet the flop with the king 5, got it. Like, ace queen 3, 3-bet the flop with the king 5. All right, let's go.
I like that that's your take. Like, your takeaway is like, anytime I name a hand they might have, it's like permission to do something wild. It's like, okay, Kevin just approved a flop 3-bet with king high. Like,
oh, someone opened the button. I got the queen 5. Okay, 10% 3-bet.
Yeah, right. I approve the queen 5 offsuit 3-bet. I mean, these are okay plays. You just don't do them every time.
Yeah, I got it. You just 10%. Next time I text you, I'm like, yo, it was 10%. Like, it's fine.
Yeah,
okay,
that's definitely the hard part about playing with randomizer, is like using a randomizer, rolling like your 99 out of 100 or whatever, and like not doing something stupid. That's the hardest thing in the world.
Okay, so this was 3-bet pre. Doug actually chose to bet the flop. Got called.
Yeah, I would expect Doug to check a lot on this flop, so it is interesting to try and figure out like what he gets here with. I also don't think he always checks this turn. Like, if he bet the flop with a hand like pocket 9s, I think he would try to maybe block and see a cheap river.
Yeah, I did expect this small sizing from Daniel. It just places a lot of pressure and leaves him uncapped to the river, where you could like probably do some overbets.
Yeah, I think it's a good bet size. He's going to want to protect if he has... Oh, interesting. So 6-7 makes a lot of sense for Doug.
Yeah.
You know, he definitely could have done something on the turn. He could have like block bet the turn, but of all the hands to check, you know,
that's probably like
that's a pretty good hand strength. Yeah.
Daniel takes one down on the right hand table.
Was that a river bluff catch, or did Doug give up with that? I'd be surprised if Doug just like showed down. Oh wow, yeah, river bluff catch.
River bluff catch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice call by Daniel. That's a tough spot to defend accurately, like 4 to a flush and heads up. Because you just kind of have to make some. You just have to be a hero. Just put the money in with one pair on 3 to a straight, 4 to a flush. That's a nice call.
Third pot on table number 1 takes it down. 3-bet on table number 2. Call. Ace 6-6. We presume this is going to be high frequency small bet, right?
Yeah, I think we saw Doug go even smaller than usual the last time this sort of texture came up, like 1400 or something. It's just really tough. You know, Daniel's going to have like, he goes a little bit bigger here, but you know, Daniel's just going to have like queen 10 offsuit. Like, what do you do with these hands, right? They're so marginal. There's a lot of break-even hands in that spot.
9-4-4 on table number 1, single raise pot. Third pot. So Daniel's gonna have a lot of availability to float here, right? Like, it's just like all overs, like, are fairly easy calls. Maybe some like 6-7, 6-5, things like that are fairly easy calls here as well. Anything with like 2 overs, any backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, like has to continue. Any ace high has to continue.
Yeah, I think where people get into trouble, like, you know, some players, so using this board, like, you know, there's the really loose heads up players who are going to find continues with like jack of clubs, 6 of hearts or something. Just like, because they see the board and they're just like, I got to play loose, it's heads up. And they just get like a shred of equity and they're like, okay, I'm seeing the turn. And those players I think are playing like too many floats. And then there's like the other side where, you know, you've got like king 7 high or something and you just like automatic fold. And it's like, okay, well, you know, king, like you got to think about it with king high, ace high, like you have to kind of put up a fight with these hands.
Yeah, agreed. Pot size bet, check raise. Easy, and he mucks it.
Pretty quick fold there.
Do you find when you're playing, like, things get, like, relatively intense, like, after a certain amount of time, like, or you're just, like, kind of calm, like...
You know what's interesting about these matches, like, you know, I thought about this during the Galfon challenge as well. There's just, like, not a lot of situations I've been in like my sort of low profile heads up career where like I've played one person just day in, day out, you know, for anywhere close to this number of hands. Like there's a handful of players where, you know, we've crossed paths often enough, maybe on different sites, maybe in different years, like where we've maybe reached 25,000 hands, but like never just like, let's sit down for the next month and just play each other nonstop. I've like never been in that spot. And I think that's like a pretty different sort of environment where it's like, you know, it's all on the fly adjustments and like game planning and like reviewing what happened yesterday and changing things for today.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like they're very likely going back to their respective teams and then just like changing a strategy or tweaking things and like seeing how things develop, you know?
And there's almost like nothing else they really need to focus on, right? Like, you know, if I'm playing like, if I go on whatever, you know, 2 or 3 networks and try to sit the heads up games or sit 6 max and play whoever sits, like I'm playing like 10 different opponents in a week and they all play different. They all use different strategies. So like, I'm just trying to be solid and I'm just trying to like build up my game plan theoretically. Like these two, like they probably did that in their prep work.
Yeah.
And clearly like, you know, Doug's been tweeting out every now and then, like he's running the sim still, but like a ton of their work at this point is just like, what is my opponent doing? And like, why is that a problem for me? Or like, how does that, you know?
So here we go.
How does that match up with me?
Daniel chose to check raise the flop. Bet through the turn ace of clubs, which is going to be generally better for Doug, and lands on the river with a king 4. Doesn't choose to bluff it. What do you think there?
Yeah, just well played. I think that's a pretty good check raise candidate on the flop. It's like the right kind of, you know, blocker and backdoor equity, and then, you know, he gets a pretty favorable turn. Not amazing turn, but if we're talking about like his sets and his 2 pairs still being strong, like they're still quite strong on that turn.
Yeah.
So I think, but like the river, I think would be a mistake to bluff with a hand that strong. He actually has some showdown value, so maybe he could click his randomizer button if he rolls the 10%, he goes all in, right? He does have a 4 in his hand, which is like, it's valid. Like he's gonna have pocket 4s sometimes. He's gonna want to go all in with pocket 4s. So or like ace 4. Those are both valid hands. So he could bluff the river. I would only go all in if I was gonna bluff a hand that strong.
So this is a 3-bet pot. Doug chose to bet 5,500 on the flop. Turn 10 of diamonds after getting called on the flop. Chose small size. Gets shoved on. Rip. So what kind of hands would Doug be third potting the flop there? The board was 7-6 deuce. Turn 10 of diamonds.
Yeah, third potting the turn, you mean?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, like it's interesting that he sizes down, just because like, you know, a handful of stuff got there, like 10-9 I guess becomes a pair of 10s, 8-9 becomes a straight, but like not much else has changed. So he's really like, he really seems to be honing in on like pocket 8s, 9s, and 10s in his own range as like these are the target hands to create this third pot. Because like 7s and 8s are just really thin, or sorry, 8s and 9s are really thin, and then 10s just turn to set. So like none of those hands need to bet big. But like the other stuff doesn't, I guess it just doesn't care too much. You know, if he has king 10 suited, if he has pocket queens, he just wants to bet, and if Daniel jams, he's going to snap call those hands. But the quick fold makes me think, you know, maybe pocket 8s for value, but probably just a bluff of some kind.
Daniel wins a decently sized pot on table number 2, picks off a bluff with pretty much a value catching hand.
Yeah, those hands just, you know, nut low with an open ender for Doug, and, you know, top pair second kicker on a clean river for Daniel. Just kind of no-brainer decisions for both of them.
turn deuce after the flop c-bet by Daniel on table number 1. This is generally going to be a good card, right, for Daniel?
Yeah, it's like, it's pretty nice. I mean, the deuce in particular, Doug's not going to have a lot of deuce X pre-flop. If there's like any card that, you know, we don't see a ton of out of the big blind, it's deuce X. And then it pairs. So like, you know, very, very likely that Doug is at the turn with like a weak 1, or well, I guess it's 2 pair technically, but like, you know, a weak 5 or weak 7 at best. He does end up having, you know, medium strength 7, and he just gets a big value bet paid off. Pretty interesting.
I mean, a 7 is just going to be pretty good there, right? Like after it goes check on the turn, river another low card. It's just going to be relatively good, I think. I'm surprised. I guess like Daniel ended up with like an ace high combo, maybe like a pocket sixes combo. Likely on the river.
This is one of those, like, you know, you asked earlier if there's like a problem, I guess, with using like too few bet sizes. That's definitely a spot I found myself in before, where like I'm at that 7-5 deuce flop with like pocket 4s or like pocket 6s or like king 5 or something. And it's like, yeah, you know, all I do here is bet big, and I also don't really want to check this hand. So like, I guess I'm just gonna bet big, and then you just like occasionally find yourself in that spot like that Daniel was just in, where it's like, okay, now I'm paying off, like I've basically just given 2 huge bets to like a marginal pair of 7s with like an even weaker pair, and you're not feeling great about it. But I think that it's a small mistake at worst, in kind of the grand scheme of things.
Three bet pot on table number 1, 8-6-3. This is going to be generally pretty good for Doug, but he does choose to check.
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of like big bet or check from Doug in these spots. Like a small bet on this board, it doesn't accomplish so much. It's just like a little bit too easy for Daniel to click call with just kind of like anything in his call 3-bet range, or to raise really often. It's also a board that Daniel's supposed to raise really often. So Doug definitely finds some checks with just like, you know, good ace high, good king high, and then some trappier hands like a 6 or pocket aces, maybe a set.
3/4 pot now on the turn after the check back on the flop. Call, river 3. So what kind of hands would Daniel check back flop with, and then 3/4 pot turn?
He's repping pretty thin already. I mean, he's kind of representing like maybe a turn straight or a set as like kind of the obvious ones, but also like 3/4 suited or 6/4 suited. I think he's right away claiming a pretty strong hand. If he was going to sneak in a thin value bet, it would be like pocket 5s or pocket 7s, which I think would be a pretty good play occasionally.
5-4 for Doug Polk.
I like that line from Doug. It's like it's a non-intuitive hand to check the flop, but like keeping in mind that Daniel's going to be raising pretty often when he c-bets that board texture, you just like don't really want to get blown off of a 5 high draw, right? Or you don't want to be caught in a spot where like you're c-betting facing a raise and you have to decide if you're going to blast it in with 5 high or if you're going to peel and just like hope that Daniel lets you see the showdown. Yeah, I think it's good to start with a check.
What about Daniel's situation? So he chose the flop check back, then the turn big size, and then gave up. Did he like value bet ace high on the turn? Maybe like.
I'm thinking probably not. I mean, there's a chance he had like spades, like nut spades, or like ace 3 of spades or something like that. That wouldn't shock me. But I think it's more likely he just like found some equity and started a bluff, and then just decided that the river wasn't the spot for him. Yeah.
Thought maybe he would get called by ace high on the river, given that pretty hard to have like good hands after the board pairs there.
I can definitely see the logic that, like, you know, if Doug's on the turn facing that big bet with like just ace jack high or something, like maybe he just folds it most of the time. Mm-hmm. You know, not necessarily thinking that he needs to play like super tough defense on the turn. So on the river, like, I mean, Doug's also just kind of a station, right? Like he loves to click his call button. So like I mean, not to say that like the correct play is just to never bluff Doug, but like if Daniel goes all in on the river there and he's holding 5-4, like he probably calls. That's you know, you're really hoping that you run into like the light turn calls that are few and far between. So you want to be careful with your bluffs.
Is there room for exploit there? Like if Doug just calls, then with those kind of combos and maybe some ace high combos, then does Daniel get to exploit if he does under bluff?
I mean, it's like it's a tricky balance to just call it all or nothing, right? Like to say, you know, this is a spot where I'm not going to bluff Doug, and this is a spot where I'm going to bluff Doug, because smart players pick up on those things, and I don't think that either player is approaching it that way. I think they're just looking at it. Wow, and as we say that a bluff gets picked off right there, you know, Daniel thinking that that spot was fine to bluff, but Doug just had a monster. He had a very easy call.
So it went big bet on the flop, 75%, big bet on the turn, and then Daniel landed with the king 7 on the river. Now when 8-7 and king queen filled, and he just went for it with the overbet. I think it was 14K into 14-5 into 12-5.
Yeah.
It feels like Daniel's combo is pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's like it's the type of hand. So, you know, we've seen Daniel checking a lot of like equity driven stuff on the turn, which is totally fine. But you need, if you're going to be doing that, you need to make sure that you're bluffing something different, right? So he finds the different bluff there. He finds like the future blockers, whatever you want to call it, just like the one high card, one low card, so that like when the draws do come in, and you do have some really strong value bets, you still have like a pretty solid bluffing candidate, and that was definitely one of them.
Ace-8 wins a medium-sized pot there on table number 1, turning top pair for Doug. Big pot developing on table number 2.
It really pays to have the best hand as often as Doug has had the best hand today.
Yeah, we're getting torched on our bet right now. There's a 3-bet pot, king 5-7.
It's definitely not looking great for DNegs minus 60K.
Yeah. So to catch people up, 3-bet pot, small sizing from Doug gets called, turn 10 of clubs, check, 9,600 from Daniel.
Yeah, very, very much just saying from here on the turn that he's got like king jack or better, and he's going for all of it.
Backdoor flush does fill.
It's the type of river card where Daniel's bluffs are going to be pretty heavily incentivized to just keep going for it.
9s.
Wow. So good chance. The fact that he gave up and lost to 9s, just good chance he hit the 7 on the river. I think, like, you know, he's going to have some straight draw floats or some backdoor floats on the flop that hit the 7 on the river, and just kind of make perfect sense. Even as tempting as it is to bluff when you pretty likely have the worst hand, you just have too much equity there with a 7 to run the bluff on the river.
Potentially beats like ace jack, ace queen, things like that. That like
5x. Like you could have just like the queen 5 off 10%er, right? So
Daniel sits out on table number 1, and I did see the ... come up, so this might be over. It is also exactly 2 hours.
Yeah, and I mean you can't blame if Daniel wants to call it quits here if they've kind of crossed the threshold. Like when you're just getting shown the best hand after hand after hand, it's hard to continue to play your A game.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like he's finding the bluffs. Like he's finding the bluffs. Like he had the king 7. He found the overbet, and then now all of a sudden, he just gets picked off every hand. You know, it's kind of annoying. Then you flop the top pair. You're like, oh, I'm gonna win a big one because he keeps picking me off, and then just runs out a 4 flush. And you're just like, I hope I'm good.
He might have been able to sneak in a little value bet there on the river, but it's ambitious. It's pretty ambitious. I would have been tempted though.
Greedy. 10-5-3. I believe we're gonna see this is one of the sizes. Are these one where you go with the big size or no?
I think I think just going by like the general rule of thumb, like the 10 is a bit too high, and the flush draw is also a bit discouraging for the big size. So I don't think you're going to see it quite as much.
All right, I think that is the end of this session. This was a session that saw a lot of Douglas Polk making a lot of good hands and a lot of good bluff catchers, and I think he played well, you know. And yeah, man, we both lost today. We both lost our bets. That's okay. But
I'm still holding out a little bit of hope for Daniel to just hop back in here and go on a 300K upswing. But yeah, I think it's pretty likely that we lost this one.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I don't want to just like close the stream just yet until he leaves the table. Like, you never know what happens. Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Is he back? This is why you can't close the stream. Oh, we're dealing cards.
All right.
We're dealing cards. What an animal. He comes in with the 3-bet right off the jump. Like, let's go. Oh, no, sit back down.
Oh, they must have been uneven on buttons or something. Oh,
that's exactly what happened. They were like, hey, Doug texted him like, you owe me a button.
Yeah.
And
you kind of have to sort that out every session, right? Because if you just let the tally go, it could easily be like 7 buttons in someone's favor by the end. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. All right. There it is. He set out. So he snuck in a little 3-bet. As like, I'll see you later. I'll see you later.
That's a classic move. If Doug texts him and says like, "Hey, you owe me a button," it's so classic to just spite 3-bet.
Spite 3-bet.
Yeah.
Man, this was amazing. Like I'm gonna invite you.
A lot of fun.
Obviously, I'm gonna invite you back. But
please do.
Tell the people where they find you. I've obviously watched all your videos on Run It Once. But
yeah, so Run It Once is where I make my content. You can see a ton of old videos there if you have an elite sub. And my Twitter, Rabichow. I saw some links going in the chat earlier. At Twitter, I do most of my, plugging of new videos, new coaching stuff, whatever I'm working on. But yeah, I do mostly, private coaching work, I guess. So that's like that. My Twitter's the best place to contact me for anyone who's interested in that.
Yeah, if you guys want to play heads up, if you want to 3-bet the queen 5 off in the big blind, if you want to find the few, I saw 2020 heads up no limit is all about future blockers.
I saw that comment. That was funny.
So if you want to learn the future blockers, hit up Kevin. I will do everything in my power to both budget to pay Kevin and to convince him to come in for every stream. I don't know. I might have to open up a fucking Patreon account. I don't know how much I'm gonna charge, but it's gonna be fun, man. No, I had a blast, of course. Like, it's always a pleasure having you here, man.
I appreciate you asking me on.
I learned a lot too. Like,
good. I'm glad. Yeah.
And I don't have any beef with Run It Once. Like, I want people from Run It Once here. But if you worked in Upswing, like, I wouldn't have you. I'd just be like, no. I don't care how good you are. I don't care if we're friends. You're not coming. But
fair enough.
I like Phil Goffman. I like.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, yeah.
All right, man.
I'm looking forward to it. I'd be happy to talk again soon.
All right, brother. Thank you. Enjoy your breakfast tomorrow. Your apple oatmeal.
Enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, you too, brother. Thank you.
Take care.
You should go now. Run. No, I won't leave you here. We can run together. Listen, if we run together, they will shoot us from behind. We both die. So, how's about you here? They will kill you.